I'm not sure how many in the audience here heard the news this week about the film, but John, the producer here, would you like to share the news?
Yeah, this week it was announced that Jirga would be Australia's official entry into the Best Foreign Film in the Oscars next year.
It's such incredible news. And so when did you find out? How did that sort of come about? Was it just sort of a phone call this week, or?
No. Somebody sent me the on the net the announcement in the Hollywood Reporter. I didn't know until I got that, to be really honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I knew it was submitted, and there are various boxes to tick, and they all had to be ticked by the 1st of October.
Yes, yeah.
And I was surprised it was announced so quickly, actually. So yeah. Anyway, there you go.
And Ben, hearing that news, I mean, thinking back to when you first put pen to paper and started writing this story, to then come full circle and have that kind of news come out this week, what does that feel like for you?
Yeah, well, it's a thrilling thing. I mean, the biggest enjoyment I've had with this process is meeting people who are coming out of the film at screenings like this. And just listening to people's feedback and how people have been affected by it. But a recognition like this, representing Australia at the Oscars, I'm hoping that this will result in more people seeing the film and more people moved by the film. So that's what it means to me, and so I'm very excited about it, yeah.
And John, we were just chatting before about, how does something like that news help with an indie film like this? Obviously, we get to see these sort of films at festivals like the Brisbane International, but, does something like that really help, obviously, promote something like this?
Sure. It's big help is in the US, where they sort of believe about the Oscars. It's sort of like a religion. So, yeah, already we've got an offer for a theatrical release there, a small offer. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So I thought, let's go back. And look, if anybody, obviously after seeing something like that, there is an incredible book that you actually have an opportunity to get your hands on, a copy of this limited edition one outside. This is Benjamin's personal kind of memoir of filming it over there. It's certainly a 101 in terms of guerrilla filmmaking. If you want to go and make a film on when everything changes on a dime, I think this is a book to read. But tell me a little bit about going over there. Obviously you wrote the story. The story is set in Afghanistan, but the idea was to shoot it in Pakistan originally. Is that correct?
Yes, so there was a first draft of a screenplay, and I think, like a lot of young filmmakers, I have a few scripts going at any one time, just kind of plodding away at it. And then out of the blue, I was contacted by a Pakistani wannabe producer who had a best buddy who was a very wealthy businessman in Islamabad, and who he'd seen one of my previous films, Son of a Lion, my first film set in Pakistan, and he was also an ethnic Pashtun, and he really wanted to get behind another project because he loved Son of a Lion. That film was called Son of a Lion. So he offered $100,000 in budget, in kind really, not in cash, which was a problem I only realised afterwards, to basically fund another film. And although this film Jirga was set in Afghanistan, I thought it was possible to shoot in the tribal areas of Pakistan. So along the Afghan border, the British divided the country up, Pakistan up into with the Durand Line, and so a lot of Pashtuns who consider themselves Afghans reside in Pakistan, along with millions of Afghan refugees who fled during the 80s, during the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. But people there obviously share the ethnicity with their brothers and their tribes, clansmen over the border, and the area looks similar, so I thought we could shoot there in Pakistan. When we arrived in Islamabad, I arrived first, and then Sam. Not long after Sam touched down, we were told that, via our contacts, that the Secret Service, the Inter-Services Intelligence, a very shadowy organisation, had blocked our shoot and not, in a sense, not given us permits to shoot. And as a consequence, the financier pulled his money out. So that was the story. So we were kind of stuck in Islamabad without without much of a budget left. We had a little bit of crowdfunding, as you saw. There's some people that put in for crowdfunding, and some Screen Australia development funding, which is really just designed to do another draft of a script, not to shoot a whole film on. But with that money, we thought we'd give it a shot, and then we decided to buy a camera in the local shopping mall in Islamabad, and buy a couple of plane tickets to Kabul, and make a couple of phone calls. We had a few phone numbers that were given to us of people that might be able to help us. And so we did that. That was what the decision we made at that point.
Ben, I mean, to me, had you shot a film before?
Yes. I'd shot Son of a Lion along with the Pakistani DOP, and then Paramedico, film about paramedics around the world. I'd done a documentary a few years earlier. I had to shoot that as well. But I'm certainly no cinematographer. I'm like, shove the camera on auto, point it in the direction of the action.
I mean, you wouldn't think that, though, from watching this and the framing, and it's just, there's some incredible shots there.
It's important to remember that there was a lot of amazing post-production. Firstly, there is an amazing... Afghanistan is simply the most stunning country, wherever you go, in terms of the nature, as you saw on screen. So you can't really go wrong there. You could shoot it with an iPhone and it'd still look amazing. Then bringing that back and having a lot of, some of the best post-production people on this project via John Maynard, was also lifted the quality of that footage and along with the editing,
And Ben, John, how did you connect? How did that happen? When you got back, or had you already known of Ben?
No, I had no idea. Never met him before. And he just walked into my office and pitched this as, look, I've got nearly 40 hours of footage, and I think there might be a film there. Would you like to have a look at it?
Wow. And
so we spent quite a lot of money having a look at it, actually.
There was a lot of names at the end there of that.
Well, it's a very, very big post-production team on it. We spent 6 weeks cutting it down to around about 2.5 hours. And then we made a decision that there were a lot of things to be done to it, but we made a decision that we could probably finance this. And so the film was made in 2 sort of ways. One, the madness of the shoot, and the other one is the incredible skills of this post-production team in terms of technicals and story and things like that.
John, you're quite well known in the industry for, I guess, not only identifying talent but nurturing talent as well. And I can only imagine sort of what happens for you when you see something that's raw and it's just a lot of footage. Like, how do you sort of see that and understand there is something magical within that? Is it something that you feel has kind of come through the same time and again on different projects? It's something that you recognise?
Well, look, obviously every project's different, but this particular one, it had a moral compass, and I felt it was a film that, that should be made in, within the context of Australian cinema. I thought it was a valuable film in what what could potentially say. And so, it's a political decision, really, in that sort of way. And,
I don't mean to be ignoring Sam over here, but I just have another question on that kind of
it's good.
vein.
I hardly ever get a question. This is really good.
It's refreshing.
It's quite refreshing for me.
I have many questions for you as well, so don't fret. On that vein of it, do you have, Ben, sort of, I guess, a background? What drew you to want to tell this specific story? Because it obviously is a political story. And I know that in another life, I don't know if everybody's aware that you are a paramedic in Sydney, which I think also, funnily enough, when I was reading the sort of the backstory that was going on behind the scenes, you seem in the book to remain incredibly calm in situations that I can imagine were only just, for a filmmaker, just horrendous in a sense. How do you think that being a paramedic had influence? Do you think is there any sort of backstory in terms of why make this film? Why tell this story?
Yeah, I think in terms of the skills you develop as a paramedic in being able to deal with or manage a chaotic scene or a lot of things going on at once that put potentially life-threatening pressure on you, and being able to stay calm in that and make sense of that, those skills are obviously transferable and very, very handy to have on a film shoot where you have a lot of those elements going on. When we had life-threatening situations, we had a lot of logistical problems that we had to improvise to get ourselves out of trouble. So that's important. But in terms of the motive for making this film, I think they all come from the same place. Whether you're being a paramedic, whether you're working in a hospital, whether you're helping someone on the street, or whether you're visiting a friend who's sick. I mean, they all come from the same place, which is your desire to help your fellow human and to make the world a better place. It's as simple as that. That's what was instilled in me growing up. It's certainly something that has been affirmed as I've grown older in my ambitions, and so my work reflects that desire to contribute positively. I've been given lots of gifts growing up, and been as a human being, good health and good education, and so I really want to use those privileges to lift those humans around me who may not have had those advantages and who could benefit from what I've learnt and what I can offer.
Sam, so when did you get this script?
When did I get the script? I think probably 6 months before we did it, or about 6 months prior. I got contacted by a casting agent who I know and who also knows Ben. And actually, no, a year prior to that, a friend of mine, this casting agent, said to me, "Hey, there's this film that's going to be made. I'll let you know about it later." And as an actor, you get told about a lot of projects that are going to be made later, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, cool," But then 6 months later, I got a call, and he said, "No, come in for this audition," and came in and had a good time.
So what do you think in terms of that character? I mean, it's obviously such an intense story. For you as an actor, what was it about that character for you that really drew you to it and
when I
spoke to you?
read the script, I felt like it was a different war story. You read a lot of war stories that are very sort of black and white, as good is and bad is, and someone wins, someone loses. Whereas I felt like this was a look at humanity and how war affects everybody. And so I thought that's an interesting story. I'd be keen to tell that.
I mean, look, in my own life, I'm a filmmaker too, but when someone says we're going to go and shoot this in Pakistan, to begin with, not even talking yet about Afghanistan, but like to go to Pakistan to film something, what were your feelings around that?
I was trepidatious about it, but at that point it was, as you've sort of heard, things changed along the way. So when I got involved, my contract was, all this stuff about bodyguards and 3-car bulletproof convoy and filming no more than 10 minutes in one location, and then we got to Pakistan and it all fell apart, and then it ended up Ben sort of going, well, we can go back to Australia with nothing, or you and I can go over there and wing it.
I mean, you must have really trusted Ben, because there's... I don't know if I would follow somebody, across the border and into a war-torn country to shoot a film, personally. But
that was quite a hard one, because obviously at that point, when everything fell apart, and he said, well, I've got this other plan, and I was thinking, well, your first plan didn't really work out so well. Do you know what I mean? So I was thinking, well, it was really about, do I think it's worth the risk and all that,
Totally.
Yeah, but our trust grew over time, because there was, for a period, Ben was trying to protect me he was trying to protect my emotional state by not telling me everything. And then there was a case where he said we were going to take this road to drive that we were originally going to fly. And I said, well, weren't we going to fly that road? And he said, no, it's a safe road. And I said, all right, cool, I'll just go to my hotel. Went upstairs and went on the Google search and searched this road. It came up as top 10 most dangerous roads in the world. And I went back downstairs and I was like, all right, let's talk about this.
Oh my goodness.
But then after that, it was completely transparent, and we started working more as a team after that.
I actually want to just go to the book for a second, because there was a passage in here. I mean, the entire book is absolutely worth reading. There's so many moments in here that I kind of gasp, and I kept turning to my partner and reading them out to him, and he was gasping. But there's this one part, page 99. You're in now, and I apologise if I say this wrong. Is it Spingar? Is that
Spingar?
Spingar.
Yeah,
Sort of one area in Afghanistan they went to shoot, and it said, the first thing I did after getting to my room was identify an escape route, just like Sam had done back in Kabul. I opened the window and looked down at a rose garden. The drain pipe was rusty and coming apart in places, but I figured I could shimmy down pretty quickly if the hotel were attacked. The night we moved into Spingar, I received some troubling information. Is it Amisha phoned me at about 11 p.m. and said, sorry for late call, but I have little bit bad news. There was an Australian woman kidnapped from Jalalabad today. What did he say? She left Spingar, then she got kidnapped. he didn't sound like he was joking. A quick search on Google confirmed that an aid worker from Perth, Kerry Wilson, had indeed been kidnapped.
It's the old Google again.
I mean,
We'd just been through this intense discussion in Kabul about being truthful with each other. Because I mean, my natural tendency as a paramedic is to balance that information you're giving people that's really intense, about their loved ones, versus trying not to kind of provoke the situation, turning into some kind of complete hysteria.
Yes.
So I really wanted. Sam was obviously anxious about being in Afghanistan. I wanted to reassure him. I didn't perceive the same threats that he did. I've been travelling in that region before. I will feel very comfortable in the company of men with turbans and beards and bandoliers and AK-47s, whereas ordinarily a lot of people in this room might not be. So I was, coming from a different place, but I wanted to reassure Sam about that road and so on and so forth. So when that Kerry Wilson thing came up, it was after we'd had the discussion where Sam said, look, you can't filter this information because the director-actor relationship has to be based on trust. It's so important. Quite apart from the fact that it allows the actor to be vulnerable. And so I knew that I had to tell Sam. You'd find out anyway.
Yeah.
And I think the way you found out was a message from someone in Australia, didn't you?
I can't remember.
In the morning. But yeah. But that was clearly a worry. And then I got a phone call from the ambassador, the second secretary, or the ambassador on the
David
Australian.
Timms? That was another
Timms.
note. I was like, oh my goodness.
I don't know whether he knows I've written about him in the book, but he called me up from Kabul. I found out where he got my number eventually, but I had no idea where he'd got my Afghan via Andrew Quilty.
Well, Google.
But he called up and said, you've got to get out of there. Jalalabad's really hot at the moment. There's no foreigners there at the moment. It's too dangerous. Get out. You're staying at the Spingar Hotel, which is this 200-room hotel that was virtually empty apart from, it looked like something out of The Shining.
Right, yeah.
It looked like that hotel out of The Shining. And in fact, incidentally, when we came up the stairs on our first day, the only Afghan family there had a pair of twin girls who were in matching outfits standing at the top of the stairs looking all spooky. And we saw that and went, oh, this is, an omen. But we said, he said, you've got to get out of there. And I said, we just got here, we need to shoot here. This is our only chance to shoot in Pashtun areas that are going to match Kandahar. And we had all this shoot lined up. And I said, but you can do one thing for us if you want to help us get out quickly. He recommended go and shoot in Morocco. I said, with what money? We've got $5. I said, this is one thing you can do. You could pass on to the Americans the coordinates of our shoot locations so that they don't target us with a Hellfire missile from a drone, because that stuff goes on.
Absolutely.
So all those scenes you see where we've got Taliban in the mountains outside Jalalabad with AK-47s and looking essentially like real Taliban, we're being watched.
There's helicopters flying.
The helicopters flying over. So we could have easily suffered friendly fire. I mean, it happens all the time in Afghanistan. People. Innocent people dying because of mistakes like that. So I then went onto Google Earth, pinned our locations, took a screenshot, emailed them to the ambassador, and then hoped that he would pass it on to the Americans. Of course, I had this fear at night. Woke up one night wondering, what if the information was passed along, but we actually ended up on a kill list instead of a do not kill list? I mean, that could happen too,
I feel like so much of that, in terms of the guerrilla filmmaking thing, the adapt or perish, never has that been more true, I think, than on a film shoot like this. I mean, it's reality adapt or perish. It's not just kind of, we didn't get the shot, let's move on to the next thing.
Over time, there have been some really, really great films. Apocalypse Now obviously jumps to mind, where the intensity of the obstacles that those filmmakers faced in making the film is really reflected on screen in the film you see. And I think if we didn't have those struggles making this film, you wouldn't see that naturalism of Mike's struggle through the desert to reach this village. I think those things run in parallel and they inform each other. So that's where you get that sense of realness, because his suffering on screen is very close to what he was going through in real life.
It does sort of have that strange kind of, there's a sort of crossover between, is this sort of documentary versus narrative and that sort of sliding scale in terms of the look but I'm assuming also just with the fact that you're not, you're casting as you went. You had to find people who were local. The young boy who plays the son of the musician who was shot in the story. I mean, what an intense portrayal of character that was, and what a find. Because I think you also mentioned, obviously, when you were looking at shooting this in Pakistan, you obviously had. Well, you tell the story,
Well, in a nutshell, in Islamabad, while we were waiting for the permits to come through, we were doing some casting, and we were looking at auditioning dozens of Pashtun kids in from Islamabad. And of course, the Pashtuns in Islamabad are very privileged and very well-fed children who go to private schools. And so we were getting these mugshots of these kids that were really off the mark, and when we were meeting them, they just wouldn't have worked, and I was kind of pulling my hair about it. When we got to the Afghan village in Jalalabad, the real dusty, real deal, we picked that kid out of a crowd 10 minutes before we shot at random, and you get it right. And that's sort of a demonstration of, aiming for authenticity by working with people whose lives are very close to the lives of the characters that you've got on screen.
Do we have any questions? Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Yes, gentleman in the red.
So the climax of the film is where Mike is actually forgiven. My question is, to what degree is that a romantic view of people there, and to what degree is that the hospitality shown by the Taliban and then the forgiveness by the villagers actually true to the tradition of the people there, given the view that we constantly receive here, the way those people are represented, that is totally contrary to what we would have otherwise expected. So how true to the tradition of those people are?
Yes, well, as you would well know, David, the truth is often contrary to what we're told and the propaganda we're getting. And so that was part of the motive of the film, was to give an opportunity for the Afghans to share some of their truth. So in terms of the forgiveness, there's a tenet in Pakhtunwali, the tribal code of conduct followed by the Pashtuns and inherited to some degree by other ethnicities in Afghanistan, as the Jirga system is, of Nanawati. Nanawati being, if someone who has perpetrated a crime, who has committed a crime against you or your clan, presents themselves at your door unarmed with genuine remorse and requests forgiveness or apologises, that you're obliged, according to your honour codes and your tradition, to forgive that person. And not only forgive them, but to welcome them into your home, to feed them, to clothe them, and to give them shelter, and to protect them with your life. And there are all these amazing stories that the Pashtuns that have been passed down from generation to generation about cases where a son was killed by his former friend, who then sought shelter in the son's parents' home and was then protected by, and even in Scottish Highland tradition there are these stories. You can research. So that is true. The Afghans believed this to be true. In fact, that part of the story was informed by discussions with Pashtuns, and they helped shape this story as a true narrative of their culture. And the other part of the question was in terms of the forgiveness. The other part of the question was in terms of the hospitality of the Taliban, yeah. So, we get a very one-sided view of the Taliban, and there certainly have been Taliban groups, certain groups that have been very brutal. Of course, when you start speaking about the Taliban brutality in Afghanistan, people will say, well, hang on a second, it's a bit rich for a Westerner to be talking about that when look at your brutality of your drone strikes that have killed innocent villagers and wedding parties and the actions of the American army, so on and so forth. But the Taliban are Pashtuns, and they are very known for their hospitality and this dynamic of guest first hostage, or that kind of. You often feel. I've often felt like a hostage in people's homes. Who I'm ready to go home. It's 8 o'clock at night. I'm tired. I'm like, I'm going to go, and they're like, no, you're not going anywhere. You're having another cup of tea, And vice versa. I think there have been a lot of hostages who have been victims of kidnappings. I met with one, Ajmal Khan, who was a professor in a university in Peshawar, who was kidnapped by the Taliban and held for 4 years in Waziristan. During the time in Pakistan, I had an opportunity to meet him and discussed his experiences. And he was so well looked after that when he was released, this is after like 4.5 years, he sent a truckload of dry fruit and nuts to the Taliban who held him, as a gift, as a thank you gift, having been so kind to him. So, it's really, and certainly that haven't always been that way, and there are some groups that are quite brutal and prefer badal, revenge, on foreigners. There's no doubt. I'm not trying to whitewash the Taliban, but I think that narrative of the Taliban is well known. I didn't need to talk about that side of the Taliban, we know that. So I'm more interested in subverting that stereotype by showing a truth, a side of these people, and they are people. They are human beings, I believe anyway, having spent some time with them. And so in that sense, I'm really interested in getting to a point where we feel comfortable in having a peace treaty, in having, peace discussions with people who are formerly our enemies. We can actually achieve that, because otherwise the fighting's just going to keep going. We're in our 18th year, and it'll just keep going unless we can make peace. I can ramble about this forever, so maybe we should move on. But
do we have another question? I saw a few more hands. Yes? Just for the camera. So that was a question to Sam, just asking how has the experience of being over there and filming over there really informed his life today?
It definitely changed me in a big way. I think, firstly, just by going over there and having my idea of what that country was based on what I'd read or seen on the television completely changed, because I was in a number of situations that were very dangerous and uncomfortable, but I was also treated with incredible hospitality and met some really wonderful people who had very little and wanted to give me everything they had, so I had that sort of flipped on its head. But I think when I first came back, the main thing was I had an idea before I left about what it might be like to spend time or live in a place that was dangerous and what that might feel like. But it was an idea, it was like an intellectual understanding of an idea. And then when I came back, having experienced it viscerally, I felt very grateful for very simple things, just sitting with I feel good now to sit with my back to an exit, whereas for a long time when I came back, I felt very awkward doing that, because I was used to anywhere we went going, okay, I know how to get back to where I was, and there's 2 exits here, there's 3 people who've just arrived. I was very sort of seeing all that stuff. So just being able to relax in my body and have a cup of tea with someone felt kind of amazing, But I'm very grateful of small things still. This is going on 2 years ago, we did this, but just sitting with my family and spending time with them, or time with a friend, I've always appreciated it, but I appreciate it in a very different way now. Yeah, that's the main change for me.
I've actually spent a bit of time in Afghanistan as a soldier, so I just want to say thank you for making this, because there's a lot of soldiers who probably feel like they've got a fair bit of unfinished business with the place. I haven't had any negative experiences that have led to mental health or anything, but I've always felt I wanted to go back there as a traveller. So it's really cool to see you guys kind of travelling there. But so thank you for making that on that regard. I'm curious about your security. So not really a film-related question per se. Obviously, with the military, we don't do anything without heavy security, and you guys are just hopping over the border and winging it. I'm just curious to know how that works in your realm, because it's a different realm to mine.
Great question.
Yeah, and thank you for your comments as well. We're really interested in getting feedback from people who've served there, so have to chat afterwards. But security, most of the time we didn't have much security. We had an actor with a 9mm under his shalwar kameez, that was it. In Jalalabad we needed more because we were shooting in the mountains. We had Afghan National Army, we had the police, we had NDS, we had another agency that look after diplomats there. But I felt very uncomfortable moving about with that security detail, because as I learnt with Son of a Lion, you're the safest when you're on your own or with someone else, dressed like a local, with your beard and your pack-hole hat, in a rickshaw, with the people. and completely unarmed. That's when you're actually safest, because you don't stand out. You blend in, and also people don't perceive that you've got something to hide or that you're scared of them. I think Afghans don't react very well to people who've got their barriers up. They're like, oh, are you doing something dodgy in our country? Look how much security you need. What are you fearing? So I remember walking down a very heavily guarded street in Kabul and seeing the way foreigners move about. You would have had this experience, in those bulletproof Land Cruisers, and you've got all the bulletproof vests and people with the guns and your full security detail. And these are the convoys that get attacked. These are the convoys that suffer the suicide bombings and the roadside IEDs. So we didn't want that to happen to us, so we chose a more kind of covert way of moving about.
I just wonder whether the film that you sort of wrote, the film that you thought you were going to shoot in Pakistan, and the film that you have today, and certainly with John's assistance and all of the people that he was able to sort of bring on the back end of this film, is this the film what you thought you were going to make, or is it completely different?
I think it's much better than the one we were set out to make, honestly. The through line was always the same, right? Yeah. And the ending of the film was always the same. But the beginning, we had all these...
No, the ending was different. The ending, I was going to reunite with the taxi driver on the rooftop. And
that's right. You can drink tea and have a rhubarb session. Yeah, okay, there was a few little differences. But in terms of the Jirga and the forgiveness and the meeting of the widow, that was all in the original script. But the beginning, Sam was going to travel south with a young ex-ANA interpreter, and they were going to speak English, and so that whole section was in English language. And when we ended up going with Sher Alam, who can't speak English, Sher Alam Miskinustad, who plays a taxi driver, who was in Son of a Lion, for those of you who've seen that film, he played the father character. He doesn't speak English, and we really then had to work with the fact that they had to communicate non-verbally, which I find is really interesting, and we used music as a tool for that. And there's so much more to communication, as you can see in this film, than language. That was a big difference, and I think the film is richer for that dynamic.
It's very... as you're watching it, and for a decent sort of 20 minutes there, you're not really, you've made that choice not to use subtitles for a lot of those conversations. Is that something that, when you were sort of working together, was that a bit of a debate around that sort of to make sure the message was coming through in terms of just very standard storytelling mechanisms?
Yeah, there were lots of debates, of course, when you're putting something together through its post. But yeah, we did talk about that, obviously, and eventually I think we made the right decision. You get that feeling of really being in a foreign place. We've all been there. You're never quite sure what people are saying about you or thinking about you, or even they care about you. And then it makes us tell the story in pictures as well. I mean, this is what cinema's about.
Do you think that... Sorry, I'll go to the audience again, but I don't know how much more time we have there. We probably need to wrap up in a minute. I'll throw to the audience, and then I'd like to ask one more question.
There's an Afghan up the back there actually had his question.
Yes, please, come on down.
From Jalalabad, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This is the moment of truth, isn't it, really? Thank you.
Thank you. I think really just, that's a wonderful way to kind of wrap up today, but I just wanted to sort of say, do you think that after doing a film like this is really, do you think it's going to inform the next film that you do? Is this something that now, as you sort of move forward into whatever work that you're doing now, and the same for you, Sam and John, is this something that now really has sort of shifted something within you? As you sort of with your craft?
Rom-com. We both want to do a rom-com next. Something more But we were talking about the other day. If Sam was offered something in Hollywood, like a war film, like American Sniper 2 or something, that he absolutely could never accept that a role like that, even if it was working with Clint Eastwood. Because
it's very hard to, because it would just undo everything we did with this.
Exactly. Yeah. And the next film for me would you know, I mean, it's a long process, this filmmaking, and, you know, it's exhausting. So, but the next film will be something, not necessarily in that part of the world, but something that's got some meaning that, you know, hopefully will make the world a better place. And, you know, if it has a result where not only people here, but Afghans are acknowledging, or, you know, people who we're depicting are acknowledging that it's a truthful and authentic depiction of their culture that's very rarely seen, then I think, you know, we've achieved what we set out to do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everybody.
Thank you.